Hey everybody. So we're about a month away from the NHL playoffs, and I am getting really, really excited about it because the NHL playoffs are my favorite thing in all of sports. I think it's the best anything in all of sports. Is the NHL playoffs. It's just 2 months straight of just pure intensity and just fantastic hockey and just edge of your seat action. I absolutely love the NHL playoffs, and we're getting close for this year. So the playoffs are incredible. They're always incredible. Some it varies a little bit. Some years are better than others, but the playoffs are always incredible. But the biggest, probably the most important thing, and what makes the playoffs, what can really push a playoff series over the top or make certain year playoffs over the top are the matchups. Matchups are the most important thing. If no matter who plays, you're going to get intensity. It's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be high level hockey. It's going to be it's going to be great no matter who plays. But if you can get, a playoff series between division rivals, between teams that absolutely hate each other, between teams that are so close that every game could be a one goal game. Those are the series and the matchups that push the NHL playoffs over the top, that make it the incredible 2 months that it is. And going into this year, there are the potential for a lot of great first round matchups and second round matchups and third round there are a lot of great matchups that can happen this year based on where the standings sit right now. So what I'm going to do right now is I have four potential playoff series in the West and four potential playoff series in the East. First round, because there's no point in looking at anything past the first round at this point because we're not even to the playoffs yet. There's just I'm focusing on the first round. So based on the standings and where they sit right now, these are some very realistic possibilities for first round playoff matchups. And these are my dream matchups that I want to see this year based on the matchups that could actually happen or likely to actually happen. So I have my list here. Let's start with the East, and in the Eastern Conference, number one is Toronto versus Boston, and this is, I would give this like a 90% chance of happening. This is probably going to happen. No, neither of these teams are catching Tampa Bay because they're way up ahead, and they're a few. Montreal's at 77 points now. Both of these teams are up in the mid 80s, so they're probably not going to drop down to Montreal. They could, but they're probably not going to. So that means that it's very, very likely that the 2-3 matchup in the Atlantic Division is once again Toronto versus Boston. Second year in a row. Oh my God, I cannot wait. This might be my favorite matchup of the entire playoffs. Never mind just the first round. Boston versus Toronto. I mean, we saw it last year. It went 7 games. It was absolutely incredible. That really brought Boston versus Toronto back into the limelight and the rivalry. Made it one of the better rivalries in the league. Then in their regular season games this year, it was absolutely nuts most of the time. Boston won 3 of the 4 games. Some of the games got really, really nasty. There's obvious, real hatred and emotion between these two teams. The Toronto versus Boston rivalry is 100% fully back on. And if they, it looks like they're going to meet in the playoffs again this year. If they meet again, that is just going to ramp things up a whole other notch. It's going to be incredible. So Boston versus Toronto is my absolute, must have playoff series of the first round this year. Next, we have Pittsburgh versus Tampa Bay. So for this to happen, Tampa Bay obviously is going to finish first in the Eastern Conference. Pittsburgh would have to finish as the second wild card team for this to happen. If this does happen, oh boy, I will be watching every second because first of all, that would be a pretty tough first round matchup for the best team in the freaking league in Tampa Bay. So that'd be a really really interesting series just based on Tampa Bay blows everyone out and blows the rest of the league away in the regular season, and then ends up getting a fairly tough first round matchup because Pittsburgh, quite frankly, hasn't had a great regular season this year. And they're still teetering on the edge of being in the playoffs or not. So, I mean, this is it's certainly possible to happen. But the biggest thing and why this is one of my, one of the series I really, really want to see is that when Pittsburgh and Tampa Bay have played this year, it has been ridiculous. It's been like hockey from 15 years ago. They had Stamkos and Malkin fought earlier in the season. The last time these two teams played, it was a two-fight game. There's been scrums. There's been huge hits when these teams play. It's been incredible hockey and extremely physical hockey from two teams that don't really play that way all that often. So if they can carry that hatred over into a playoff series, I mean, it's going to be must-see hockey. So I really, really hope that Pittsburgh is the second wild card team because if we can have Toronto versus Boston and Pittsburgh versus Tampa Bay both going on at the same time, I mean, that would be absolutely incredible. If Pittsburgh doesn't finish in the second wild card and play Tampa Bay, I would want them to finish third in the division and play Washington because Pittsburgh versus Washington would be one hell of a series again, which this would be like the fourth straight year that they would have met in the playoffs. Now, usually it's been the second round where they've met. This year it would be the first, but still 4 straight years meeting each other in the playoffs. Huge rivalry already between the teams. It would just add to it and make it so much more intense and bring it up to a whole new level. You have obviously the Crosby versus Ovechkin story. You have the Ovechkin versus Malkin story. You have the Tom Wilson versus the Pittsburgh Penguins story. Everything would be there for that to be an incredible playoff series. So I want Pittsburgh to play Tampa Bay. If they don't, then I want them to play Washington. And lastly, if Washington doesn't play Pittsburgh, I want them to play the Columbus Blue Jackets again because Columbus, they met in the playoffs last year, so that sets the stage for this series. They met in the playoffs last year in the first round. If they meet again, when you start playing the same teams in the playoffs over and over, that is how rivalries are built. And while Washington and Columbus aren't natural rivals the same way that Toronto and Boston are, and Pittsburgh and Washington are, that there's definitely could be something brewing there, especially if they continue to meet over and over and over again. So I would love to see a rematch of that first round series from last year. Columbus, they went all in on this season at the trade deadline. They brought in Ryan Dzingel. They brought in Matt Duchene. They brought in Adam McQuaid. They are all in on winning now. They kept Panarin and Bobrovsky. They are all in on winning now. So for them to get the defending Stanley Cup champions in the first round would be one hell of a series. That would really put Columbus to the test to see if going all in was worth it, and it would give a rematch from last year's first round and just a rivalry that is building between those two teams. So those are the 4 series that I would love to see in the Eastern Conference. Obviously, we have some repeat teams here, so they all can't happen. But I think any of these matchups would be absolutely phenomenal and incredible to watch. Moving over to the Western Conference now. First up, and this is with the way that the standings are looking now, this is probably going to happen as the 2-3 matchup in the Central. We have St. Louis versus Nashville. I have watched St. Louis and Nashville play in the regular season a couple of times this year and watched a couple of their games. Wow, what an incredible matchup this would be for a playoff series. Absolutely incredible. Those two teams absolutely hate each other. They're both big, heavy, physical teams. It would be a really physical, nasty series. I think there would be a lot of animosity between the teams, not building over the series from the drop of the puck. From the opening faceoff, these teams would hate each other. They already do, and it would just be playoff hockey at its absolute best. So it's looking good for that to be the 2-3 matchup in the Central, and I really, really hope it stays that way because that is the number one series I want to see in the Western Conference in the first round. St. Louis versus Nashville. I will watch every single game of that series without a doubt. It's just what an incredible matchup that would be. Moving on, we have Minnesota versus Winnipeg. Now, this absolutely could happen as well. Winnipeg is probably most likely going to win the Central Division. So that would mean Minnesota would need to be a wild card team, and the Central teams don't have as many points as the top of the Pacific. So Minnesota would need to be the first wild card team, and while in Winnipeg win the division, which is certainly a possibility of happening with the standings where they are right now. Minnesota has 70 points. Dallas is currently in the first wild card spot with 71. They're right next to each other. It absolutely could happen. They met in the first round last year. It was only a 5-game series, but it was a very, very heated 5-game series. And I would hope that it would go longer this season, at least to 6, maybe to 7 games. But there is strong animosity between the Wild and Jets. And again, when you get these playoff series happening, the same teams meeting in the playoffs over and over and over, it builds that rivalry, it builds the hatred, and it makes it one of the best matchups in the NHL. So for them to meet in the playoffs 2 years in a row would be absolutely fantastic, much like having Toronto and Boston meet in the playoffs 2 years in a row is just going to ramp things up over more and more. So Minnesota versus Winnipeg is absolutely something that I want to see. Now, if Winnipeg doesn't, or if Minnesota doesn't move into the first wild card spot, then I would want the team that's in there now to finish there, and that is the Dallas Stars, because Dallas versus Winnipeg is another series that I would love to see. So if Minnesota versus Winnipeg can't happen, I want Dallas versus Winnipeg. Because there's strong animosity between those teams. Now, Dallas didn't make the playoffs last year, so this would be really big for them to get back into the playoffs. And then Winnipeg obviously is looking at potentially winning a Stanley Cup this season. So it would be a really, really fun first round matchup between division rivals and teams that really play physical, nasty games against each other, and it would make for the best playoff hockey that you can get. And lastly, for out west, we move on to the Pacific Division, and this is another one that if the standings stay where they are right now, this one does happen. It is the Vegas Golden Knights versus San Jose Sharks. So San Jose and Calgary are kind of right on top of each other for first place. I hope Calgary wins the division because I want San Jose and Vegas to play in the first round. They played they played in the second round last year. For them to meet in the playoffs again, I think would be absolutely fantastic. Vegas is building, they're a new team. This is only their second year. They're building rivalries with teams, they don't they're coming in fresh. They don't have the long storied rivalries with teams the way that a lot of these original 6 teams do, or the teams that have been in since the late 60s and early 70s do. Vegas needs to build these rivalries, and there's no better way to build rivalries than playing each other in the playoffs, multiple years in a row, over and over and over, especially a divisional opponent. So this would be, this LA, they stunk this year. The rivalry between Vegas and LA was really, really good last year, and it was building and building. They met in the playoffs. and then that it kind of fell off because LA was so bad this year. Now they, excuse me, now they have a chance to build a really good rivalry with the San Jose Sharks. Um, they play 4 or 5 times every year in the regular season because they're in the same division. They met in the second round last year. They could possibly meet in the first round this year. More playoff series between teams really heats the matchup up, and that's what we need with Vegas. We need some strong rivals for them and some strong rivalries to grow. No, who better than the San Jose Sharks? So. That is absolutely a series that I would love to see, and would certainly, those games would all be on very late at night, but I definitely would stay up for a period or two for sure, maybe the whole game depending on how it goes, but I would that's a good enough matchup to get me to watch a 10:30 game, even though it's on really late. So I would love to see Vegas and San Jose meet up again and continue to build that rivalry. So those are 8 playoff series that I would absolutely love, love, love to see this year and hope to see at least a few of them. Obviously, there's some repeated teams, so they can't have two, you can't get both first round series, but some of these definitely look like they will happen. Some of these definitely, all of these could happen. And I would be happy watching any of those 8 series on a every other night during the first round, and I cannot wait for the playoffs. I hope we get some really, really good matchups, and I think we will. I think we are headed for, matchup wise, with the way that the standings look right now, I think this could be one of the better playoffs that we have seen in a number of years, just because of where teams are in the standings. I think the potential is there for 6 out of the 8 first round series to be between teams with strong rivalries with one another. Maybe even more than that. Maybe even 7 or all 8 series could be rivalry matchups, and it could be a whole lot of fun to watch. So I cannot wait for the playoffs. We still got a month of regular season hockey left, but it will be beginning of April before you know it, and then start my favorite 2 months in all of sports. And I think the best playoffs of any league, without a doubt, blows everything else away. The intensity and just that everything about it, the edge of your seat action, night in and night out, is unrivaled in the NHL playoffs. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description below. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.